Today's episode is sponsored by Wells Fargo Advisors Financial Network FiNet, member SIPC. FiNet is focused on helping independent advisors support their clients and reach their goals with unique, ever-evolving solutions and resources from one of the nation's largest financial institutions. Learn how you can get more with FiNet at wfa.com/independent. That's wfa.com/independent. Welcome to the WealthStack podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Rosic, the director of WealthStack Content and Solutions. In this episode, I'm joined by Andres Mazabel, head of advisor sales at Trust and Will. Today's topic, trends around the digitization of the estate planning industry. Andres, so thrilled to be speaking with you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Of course, Shannon. Thanks so much for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And before we dive into the first segment, I want to start with your background and what makes Andres, and what led you to pivot from the world of banking that you were originally in.
Yeah, good question. People always ask me that. I spent 13 years in private banking with JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and I was, as a senior in college, started as a teller. And from there, I really kind of started to work in the financial advising space. So started to work very closely with advisors. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I turned 30 at the time. And I was like, I can stay in this box of banking for the rest of my life and it'll be comfortable and nice. But I wanted something else. And I moved back to San Diego. And long story short, it's when Trust and Will was really 13 people at the time. They had raised their Series A. And I was like, estate planning. And I, working in over a decade with clients and high net worth, I saw the big barriers. And like story short, that's how I found out about Trust and Will. And, if you would have asked me a few years ago, you're helping financial advisors with online estate planning, I'd be like, no way. But here I am. It's been an amazing chapter in my career, honestly, the most fulfilling. And we're really at the early stages. So born and raised in Colombia, we immigrated to the US when I was 12 and have called San Diego home for most of my life and can't complain about that. It's a beautiful place.
All right, you're like an onion, my friend. Just peel back the layers, learn more and more about you. So appreciate that background.
Sure.
But before we, get to my favorite section of Stats All folks, I do want to talk about, just for listeners, the difference between a trust and a will. What are the pros and cons of each, and how should advisors be approaching these conversations? Because while these concepts and methods have been around for a while, digitally is a whole new arena.
I appreciate you bringing this up right off the bat, because the more advisors that we talk to, there's still a big missing lack of education, even for some advisors around estate planning. So thanks for leading with that. The most straightforward answer is a trust is going to help fully avoid probate. So if you have clients or even, your own situation and you pass, you have no estate plan in place or you have a simple will, it goes through probate, right? And in some states, it could be simple, it could be straightforward. Or if you're in the lovely state of, for example, California, probate can take a long time.
Yes.
And it can be expensive. So essentially a trust, main benefits, most of the time that people talk about, it helps avoid probate. It gives you more control, more customization in how you want distributions to, for example, children or pets, etc. And then your basic will, it's essentially outlining in a document, if you pass, not when you pass, but when you pass, how those assets are going to be distributed, right? So it essentially helps take some of the guesswork out of those distributions. You make those decisions, not a judge making those decisions. And then I think in general too, estate planning, I think a lot of people think of estate planning just death planning, but also incapacitation, right? I know the pandemic seems like forever ago, but it really wasn't, right? So if you get sick, if you can't make a decision, all that is part of, the estate planning that, we do. And obviously attorneys are doing as well when it comes to really providing that peace of mind.
And obviously a big component now of the overall kind of holistic picture that financial planners are trying to deliver to their clients. So I do appreciate the context and the definitions. And I want to dive into the first segment of Stats All Folks, because Trust and Will always puts out a great annual report around the demand for estate planning. And I thought it was so interesting that it's absolutely booming among millennials. So really our generation. And in that report, you stated that 78% of millennials said that building multi-generational wealth is essential to them. What's driving our generation to take estate planning so seriously? Is it particular life events? What are you seeing?
Yeah. So this is our third year in doing, a study specifically for millennials with over 20,000 millennials. And every single year we learn that the main reasons why millennials are creating an estate plan, number one is having a baby. Number two, buying a home. And then number three is obviously marriage, and then pets, believe it or not, because and actually that's a great example for myself. I'm not married, don't have kids, but I do have two little pets that are sleeping as I talk. But essentially those are really the main triggers. And some of the characteristics is, as millennials, I think we're really the first generation that's grown in this digital first and only world, right? And also we have this framework of what do I need to do and what are the steps that I need to do to be successful, to start saving for retirement and all that we're, all the content that is out there. Estate planning, for the first time ever, this is a study that we did with caring.com last year, but millennials are creating more estate plans than people over 55 years old, which is, it's
interesting.
Like when I first heard that study, I'm like, what? Like hopefully we have so many more years to live,
right,
versus folks over 55, but we're just so focused on what are the things that we need to do to be financially responsible and, financial freedom and, being so prepared. So I think it's, really a matter of the education and the importance out there that people have on, hey, creating estate planning isn't as complicated as most people have always thought it is. So those are kind of the main things that, we always like to kind of highlight when it comes to that.
And I wanted to dig into that because I think that's so interesting, because obviously financial literacy as a just overarching theme in our industries is very important, and something as niche as estate planning or trust planning, especially in a digital way, is so new. So it's really interesting to see that, our generation, our demographics really embrace the side of things, especially because I know I saw that Fidelity Investments set in one of their recent research studies showed that 57% of existing client assets are expected to pass to the next generation by around 2045. And I've talked about the great wealth transfer before, and there's no set date. It's not Y2K where you're pressing a button and saying, hey, this is happening, but it is starting to trickle down. And so I'm curious, how is Trust and Will looking at this trend, and how does it present a significant growth opportunity for financial advisors?
Yeah. So I think that Fidelity study that you're referencing is one that, the statistic that you shared. The big opportunity is that only in the study, only 13% of advisors are connecting with their clients' children. So we know that, there's a couple different figures out there, but over 70 trillion in assets, is going to be inherited over the next few decades. We know that millennials are going to be a big part of that wealth transfer. And we also know that millennials are very proactively creating estate planning documents, right? So how can advisors from a growth perspective start really connecting and doing more wealth planning that includes that generational wealth transfer? So meaning start with the basics. What percentage of your clients have a completed and up-to-date estate plan within your book of business? Most of the time when we ask that question for, many of the firms and advisors that we work with, it's low, surprisingly, right? So start there. How do we start to implement in your calendar? There's many firms and many advisors that are focusing this on a maybe a specific quarter or even a specific month, and really starting with the education. What happens if you pass? What happens if you have a medical emergency, you can't make a decision, and you have no documents in place, right? So one, it's really providing that education, leading with the education. And then two, we're starting to hear a ton of success stories about clients completing documents, meeting with the advisor. Let's talk about your legacy. Like, yes, returns are really important and really nice. And obviously there's a peace of mind, but why do your clients do what they do? Why do they invest? Why do they work? There's something much deeper in all of us that we care about. Is it children? Is it a charity? Is it a combination? Going back to the study that we did, this was a stat that I thought was really interesting. 67% of millennials with under $50,000 in assets, so not a huge amount, chose to leave money to their charity, to a charity of their choice.
Interesting.
So we're not talking about folks that have 500,000 minimum or $1 million, 50,000. So it's just such an opportunity for you as an advisor to connect with your clients on levels that you may not connect with. Their charities, for example, for clients that are getting closer to retirement, what is that, passing on their legacy? Who are your kids? Do they know who I am? Right? If something happens to you, how do they get a hold of me? I'd love to do an introduction. So there's a lot of like family planning that we're starting to see a lot of advisors and firms implement. And again, from a peace of mind perspective, like, yes, it's amazing that you can, send your kids off to college. That's a huge goal, and that's really important. But more importantly is, do your clients know that once they pass, how will that be passed on in an easy way that doesn't put their children or beneficiaries, if they don't have children, in a way that it doesn't make it a mess? I know there was a lot there. I'll pause, but I would say that's really the main opportunity, is building that estate planning into much more than just completing documents, but legacy planning that advisors are doing.
And I want to dig into that a little bit because, as we've showcased here, millennials in particular are really steering away from tradition to create, again, those modern kind of personalized legacies. And we all know, as you referenced before, how much this generation, and me included, loves our pets, and so much so that they're being worked into long-term plans. And so, how critical is customization for clients and investors when it comes to trust and estate planning? I would imagine that technology is playing a major role in making this much more feasible for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you that we get that question often from advisors. Because I'll tell you, when I was in the industry in banking, we always thought of, online estate planning, and LegalZoom was really the only main player, 15 years ago or so. And there was always a kind of, maybe misconception of like, online estate planning is just cookie cutter. And I'll tell you that 80% of folks, my estimation, have very basic estate planning needs. You maybe own a home, maybe a rental property, you have kids, and maybe you own a business, right? Like a side business or something like that, right? Like that's, I think, a big bucket of the population. So within that, you have, a lot of personal values that you may say, hey, I don't want my kids getting all my assets when they're under 20, right? Or I want my kids to get a certain amount if they graduate from a 4-year university, et cetera. So there's a lot of different values that we have as human beings that we are able to, or most platforms are able to, essentially adapt and be able to, for clients to customize their documents based on those needs. Now, there's the other bucket that's, your much more complex estate planning, maybe taxable estates, special needs planning, et cetera. That's really not where trust and will specifically is focused on, right? So to answer your question, we provide a platform where we believe we're, giving access to 80% of folks to be able to customize. And then I think more importantly, Shannon, is be able to update that as well. That's something that I saw in banking for way too long. Folks coming in, if they did have an estate plan, but it's outdated, right? They haven't been able to get back to the attorney's office, or et cetera. So how can we enable and empower families to better understand when I should make an update to my estate plan, when I should maybe talk to an attorney, because we also offer that as a service, talk to an attorney to be able to make that update. And again, just be much more proactive about about clients making updates to their estate planning documents as well.
And digging into really the technological side of things, obviously the pandemic caused our industry to go virtual seemingly overnight. So let's talk about some of the trends when it comes to the digitization of estate planning and what it means for advisors and their clients. Obviously, investors and clients are no longer tethered to a 25-mile radius of finding an advisor that suits their needs, right? But I'm really curious about, when it comes to digital assets, I think we're going to reach a point where we'll eventually drop digital. Everything will just be referred to as assets. And I think people forget that it goes beyond just crypto. Keep in mind that things like social media accounts, whatever you have stored in the cloud, and with the advent of blockchain technology, I don't think we're too far off from that one day of our digital identity being, directly connected to our estate plan. So curious how Trust and Will sees that trend.
Yeah, good question. So look, first and foremost, there's a lot to kind of unpack there. I'll start with
Yes.
how with how you execute an estate plan, right? So one, the pandemic has definitely helped. So we've actually executed the first e-will in Florida in US history. So creating the first ever, from the convenience of their home, I was able to, they were able to draft their documents via Trust and Will, and then have that e-notarized. So they didn't have to leave their home. We partner with a company called Notarized. So you don't have to go to the bank, UPS, you get it notarized all directly online. We're now expanding that. And we're obviously that's, a legislative effort to be able to get approval on that. But I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's live in about 7 states today. So we see that's kind of the future that we see in terms of like creating documents from the convenience of your home, getting them notarized from the convenience of your home. And then two, to your point, 74% of millennials appointed a digital executor in the study that we just did. So the adoption of digital assets, and to your point, I love the way you put it, there will be a day where it's just assets, it's just everything is digital in some ways, right? So how can we start to empower and build an ecosystem that makes it much easier for that transition, right? Like, think about transferring, for example, the deed of your home into the name of the trust. It's still a huge pain in the butt. And it really is. It's such an old school way of doing things. So, how can we start lobbying and creating certain ways to start expanding and pushing the way that we've always done things? Because really, at the end of the day, technology has, really helping disrupting the way that we've always done things. So we have a long way to go when it comes to, transferring assets and all that, but we're starting with how have we digitized the creation of estate planning documents? And I think we've helped over, close to about 500,000 families with Trust and Will, with creating and starting their legacy with us. So that transition, I think, is really, really important. Is how do we empower that? And then obviously on the background, start working on, what does the transition look like when it comes to the transfer of assets in the future in a more digital way?
Then I have to ask, then what's on the roadmap for Trust and Will? What can we expect out of the firm this year and even beyond?
Yeah, good question. Last year we actually acquired a company called Easy Probate, and we Q4 last year we actually rebranded it. It's live on the website, so it's how can we plug in the probate offering in a way that for families that didn't have an estate plan in place, how can we help actually digitize and streamline the process of probate? So that's something that's live. We launched it recently. And then two, I think it's really just a matter of how can we create a much cleaner ecosystem. So think about it this way. If we create in the future a portal where we have, clients connected to their advisor, connected to their CPA, and then how can we create and bring in the executors and beneficiaries and empower that ecosystem, if you will, to have much better communication about what's the current status, what's going to happen when someone passes in the estate, et cetera, to give people named inside the estate plan and their trusted professionals more access, more data, and to be able to make better decisions based on that. So that's something that we're definitely working towards, in the future, in empowering those conversations with clients and families.
So I have to ask though too, are the lawyers worried with everything going digital and people being able to do it themselves?
It's really funny, Shannon. For the type of client that we serve, we actually have a lot of attorneys that are very interested in what we do because of how much it streamlines the process. Many people don't know this, but attorneys, there's like 2, maybe 3 main softwares that attorneys use to draft their own documents, right? So it's like, okay, well, if clients that have very simple needs can do it in 15, maybe 20 minutes for a simple will, right? It's how can they start to leverage technology to also help streamline what they're doing with their clients as well.
Okay, so good to hear they're not feeling as threatened as I thought then.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, fantastic. But now it's actually time for segment 2 of this episode, Andreas, which is Ask Us Anything, where I've gone out to the social universe and asked them to submit questions they want answered by you. So we did have a few folks drop into the DMs this week. So first question you got was, how can we get more Americans to get their T&E house in order?
Absolutely. Education. So that's really a big thing. And we're starting to see, so, Trust and Will, we have our direct to consumer channel and then our financial advisor channel, in which, we have about 8,000 advisors that are working with us. We have data that shows how much of an impact a financial advisor has in getting their clients to start and complete their estate plan. So if we can provide more education through all our channels, checklists, etc., that's a huge way that we can change the fact that more than, I think, 60% of families don't have an estate plan. Because
60%?
Because if I, as a individual and or family, understand, holy crap, if I pass and I have kids and they're not 18, a judge is making a decision on who's going to be the guardian for my kids, you're going to take action quicker. But a lot of people just don't know that. So long story short, education. And then 2, obviously what we're doing here at Trust and Will is accessibility, is, ensuring that people know that you don't need to spend $3,000 or $5,000 for a trust if you have a simple case, that there's easier and better ways to also do it as well. So providing more options and education would be my answer.
Fantastic. And this second question, it's a bit of a loaded one, but how is Trust and Will disrupting the trust and estate planning industry? I know you spoke earlier about, really creating that ecosystem, but wherein lies the true disruption?
Yeah. So, historically, if you wanted a will or if you wanted to trust, you go to an attorney, you call, you make an appointment. They might give you the pricing up front, or some are going to tell you it's hourly, depending on how complex your situation is. And I believe, and this is based on personal experience of doing it over 10 years, when you hand over that business card for the attorney, and I'm not saying that clients shouldn't go to attorneys, there's absolutely a place for clients and attorneys. But what we're seeing is that what we've done to disrupt is providing clients with another online streamlined solution. So think what TurboTax did for tax preparation is what we're doing with estate planning at Trust and Will, is giving families, individuals, a way that you can streamline, do your estate plan from the convenience of your home with live member support, right? So it's not just to say, hey, go figure it out online. Like, good luck. It's simple, but like you got it. No, people have questions. Estate planning isn't something that we talk about all the time or that we have a lot of education. So the disruption is providing families with state-specific, customizable documents from the convenience of their home that they can, execute, and then also be able to make updates and changes, as I talked about previously. So moving it from a brick and mortar to, going into the attorney to an online process that just makes it so much simpler, easier, and I think really more affordable.
Putting you in the hot seat with one more question, because
Bring it.
I'm curious, is what has been the reception from advisors? I would imagine that they're thrilled to be able to offer something as seamless as this and work it into their practice.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we now have close to about 8,000 advisors that are using Trust and Will. And the way that we work with advisors, the reception is this is going to be a really nice option and complement to what I currently do. So, advisors aren't drafting documents, they're not providing legal advice. There's a very robust but simple dashboard that advisors can refer to Trust and Will. They can view their client's progress, they can view their documents. So, a lot of what we talked about in the beginning in how advisors are starting to shift and being able to have more of those conversations with their clients around legacy planning, it's all because of that, the dashboard and the tools that we have. So to answer your question, reception is very, very good. We have a long way to go because there's so much value that we can provide from the inputs that clients put into the estate plan to actionable items that advisors can have with their clients around their legacy. So very excited about what we're building, and we've appreciated all the support as well from financial advisors as well.
Well, I appreciate you being put on the spot and your insightful answers, but we have come to our final, and I know I said stats all, folks, my favorite segment. I lied. It's stack it or whack it. So I'm going to throw out a few technologies and be warned, they are not necessarily WealthTech related. And you tell me if they are essentially worth the hype or not. So first one I want to throw out is AI within the estate planning, space and in that context. Stack it or whack it.
No, I'd say stack it. I think it's a great opportunity. 100%.
I would imagine, we're just now starting to see use cases, obviously, of AI within our space. So I can imagine this is just another area that's going to help streamline and benefit. So I'd have to
I can tell you
agree with
it's a topic that we talk about internally often, and it's a big opportunity for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So number 2, and like I warned you, not always WealthTech related. I may have stumbled across the fact that you are a great salsa dancer. Again, going back to the fact that you are an onion, my friend. So first off, jealous because I cannot dance. But second, stack it or whack it when it comes to an app I stumbled across called Salsa Assist. And it's actually a beat counting system specifically designed to support learners, to dance salsa. And it uses the microphone of your smartphone to extract the beat out of the music track. And, based on the vibrations, the voice prompts kind of tell you what to do. So doing too much or
found this. Yes, I would whack it. I think, and especially like when people ask me like to teach them how to salsa dance, I can't just because I just go with the flow and it's just like,
you either have it or you don't.
I feel like I was born and I just knew how for some reason. So I would personally struggle with it, but I'm sure it could help some people. But I would say just go with it. Don't overthink it and just dance.
Yep, I would have to agree with that as well. Well, Andres, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. Feel free to tell listeners where they can find out more about what you're working on at Trust and Will.
Yeah, of course, Shannon. Thanks for having me. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, it's just trustandwill.com/advisors. And also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. And be sure to like and subscribe to the WealthStack podcast on all major podcasting platforms and follow all things WealthStack on wealthmanagement.com, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And thank you all for tuning in today. Today's episode is sponsored by Wells Fargo Advisors Financial Network FiNet, member SIPC. FiNet is focused on helping independent advisors support their clients and reach their goals with unique, ever-evolving solutions and resources from one of the nation's largest financial institutions. Learn how you can get more with FiNet at wfa.com/independent. That's wfa.com/independent.